Now that we know how to display and customize maps for our users, we're going to find out how to get the user's location and then eventually to center the map right there on it. This is the first functionality that we're going to need to ask the user permission for as well. We'll see how to request user permissions in order to get the location itself. All right, so I'm going to start a new project for our location demo. Next, we'll stick with Marshmallow. And I'm going to go for an empty activity this time, just to separate the location side of things from the map side, to hopefully keep things a little simpler. Okay, here we go. So we'll start by requesting the user permissions, and we're going to do that in the manifest. That's a file that we saw a long time ago. Here it is, Android manifest.xml. And if you remember, this contains various bits of information about our app. And we want to add a permission, which I'll put at the bottom of the manifest. And you can see if we start typing uses, and we've got uses permission, and then it will predict Android name, and I'm going to go for the fine location. If you don't need a particularly precise location, you can go for the coarse location, which will give you the location according to the Wi-Fi or network signal from the phone, which is much more battery efficient. But if you're doing things with maps, you're probably going to want the fine location. And then we'll close that to end our permission request. So make sure you put your permission request in, otherwise none of your GPS related code will work. All right, so now we're going to write the code to get the user's location, and we'll do that in the onCreate method, so it will just run as soon as the app runs. And the process is reasonably straightforward. It's actually very similar to how it's done on iOS, if you've done any iPhone or iPad app development before. We start by creating a location manager, which we normally call location manager with a little L. And we get this from this to get the current main activity class. And then from that class, we get a system service. And then the system service that we need is context.location service. So that will allow us to access the location service on the phone itself. We do need to convert this to a location manager. So we do that in the way that we're fairly used to, with location manager in parentheses. Then we create a location listener, which will listen for changes in location. And we'll call it location listener with a little L. And this is going to be a new location listener. And you can see we're given the default methods that a location listener needs, which are on location changed, i.e. when the phone moves, on status changed, which is called when the location service is either enabled or disabled. And then we've got some specific methods for when the location service is enabled and when it's disabled by the user. So obviously the one we're really interested in here is the on location changed method. And here you can see we're given a location variable. So for now, I'm just going to log under the tag location, the location as a string. So now we have our code for displaying the user's location in the logs, but unfortunately we're not quite done yet, because since Android Marshmallow, we need to explicitly request the user's permission to use their location. So let's do that. We start by checking to see if we already have permission. And we do this using a class called context compat, short for compatibility. So this will make our app backward compatible to pre-Marshmallow versions of Android. And we want to check self permission. And you can see we need two variables in this method. That is the current context and the permission that we want to check for. So the context is just this, i.e. our main activity. And the permission we want to check for is manifest.permission.access fine location. So we're checking to see if we have that permission or not. So we're going to check to see if this is not equal to package manager dot permission granted. So this is if we don't have permission. So if we don't have permission, we'll have to ask for it. And we do that using activity compat, short for activity compatibility. And this time we're requesting permissions. And you can see we've got an activity that we're requesting permissions for. That is this. And then we need an array of strings to show what we want to request permission for. So we're going to create a new string array like that. And it's going to have one member in curly brackets. And that is manifest.permission.access fine location. And then finally, we need to give an integer. And this can be any number you want. It's essentially a number that we can check at the other end that it was this particular request that was made. But we're only making one request, so we don't really care too much about this number. So I'm just going to put number 1. So this will then ask for permission, and actually we can see this in action. If we run the app now, we should see that it asks us for permission to get the user's location. And there we go. So it's now asking us the permission. So we're halfway there, but I'm not going to press anything yet because we're not doing anything when they say yes or no. So to do that, we have to prepare another method, and this is on request permissions result. There it is. So we can use all the pre-created code there. It's a method that already exists, so we have to override it, and it will give us the request code. That is the number 1 down there, the permissions, and the results. So if we wanted to, we could test for the request code being equal to 1, but we know that we only have one request here, so we don't need to do that. So all I'm going to do is look to see if grant results dot length is greater than 0. And we'll also be very sure by checking that grant results 0 is equal to package manager dot permission granted. So if both of those are true, we have permission. Hurrah! So what do we do if we have permission? Well, we can now start listening for the user's location. To do that, we'll need location manager. So I'm going to redefine location manager out here in the class so that I can access it in both of these methods. So to actually do the listening for the location, we use location manager dot request location updates, and we're using the fine location. So we're going to use the GPS provider, which is in location manager dot GPS provider, and then we need to give a minimum time and a minimum distance that will lead to us getting an update. And I'm going to put 0 and 0, which will mean that we get every update. But if we wanted to be careful of the user's battery and we only wanted to check for either, say, every 10 seconds or every 10 meters or something like that, then we can change these numbers to use the GPS less frequently. And we need to link that up with a location listener, which is this location listener here. So I'm going to do the same thing there and define it outside, and then I can use it there as well. And you can see we've got an error here. That's because we need to explicitly check for permission. Once again, even though we've checked that permission has been granted, we actually, for the code to work, we need to do a check very similar to this to check that we actually have permission. So if you remember, this was a check to see if we didn't have permission. So now we'll change that to see if we do have permission. And if we do, then we'll request the location updates. So let's try this out. We should now find that we get the user's location. Just get the logs open. Here we go. So we're going to allow the location to be read by the app. And now you might be wondering how we're going to actually change the user's location. I'm not going to run around the room with my laptop. I'm going to click these three dots here next to the emulator, which will bring up the extended controls and allow us to update the user's imaginary location to whatever we like. So if I change the latitude to 40 and then click send, you can see down here in the logs, we get the user's location. That is 40 by -122.084, which is the location up here. Fabulous. So one more change I'd like to make, and that is that at the moment, if we run the app with permission already having been granted, we won't actually get the location updates, because this method is only called when the user explicitly gives permission to get the location. So I'm going to add in this line here as an else statement. So here, this means we have permission, so we can do the location manager check. So let's just run that for the final time and make sure that that works. So now when we run the app, we've already given it permission, so we shouldn't need to do it again, but we should have the location updates up and running. Here we go. So I'll update this just to something like 45 and then send the update to the device, and then let's have a look. And there we go. You can see we've got the new location there. So you can essentially use this as a boilerplate for how to get the user's location in Marshmallow and onwards. There is, of course, a chance that your app will be running on a device earlier than Marshmallow, and so we should really check for that as well. So I'm going to add in a quick check to see if device is running SDK less than 23, 23 being Marshmallow. So I can check that with if build.version.sdkint is less than 23. So if that's the case, I can just request the location updates. I don't need to do any of this messing around with permissions. But if it's not the case, then I do need to do my permissions check. So I'll put an else in there. Fantastic. So I hope that's all fairly clear, and I hope that's all in your mind as well, because I'm going to be asking you to recreate this in the next video, where we're going to be integrating location and maps by creating a map which is centered on the user's location. I'll see you there.